It was safer for me to stay silent because I didn't feel safe with this woman. Why didn't I speak up? I should have said no, not realising that in that moment I had gone into an instinctual response of safety. I became one of the 1 in 3 women in Australia that had experienced being treated poorly in birth. Like, you never forget the moment you first meet your baby. 1 in 3 women here in Australia have expressed experiencing trauma in birth. An inquiry here in Australia revealed this only last year. And further research into this has shown that lack of communication, lack of education, lack of women knowing their options, and where coercive and fear-based language in the birth space contributed to the trauma. I am one of the 1 in 3 women. Now, I want to take you back. Take you right back to the start. When I first peed on that pregnancy stick, it was the summer of 2010. I was a few days late. I knew that I was pregnant. I could feel it. I was shaking as I waited. The time was just ticking away to see that result. However, I knew I was pregnant. And sure enough, those 2 lines lit up. My heart actually sank. I was terrified of giving birth. I actually burst into tears. I was not ready to be a mum at all. I called my fiancé at the time and told him the news. He was super excited. And I'm going to be honest with you, I definitely was not excited. I was so scared of giving birth. The way I had heard my own birth story told, where my mother shared with me that she was so scared herself that she chose to go under a general anaesthetic as I was born by a caesarean. So in my model of the world, all I knew and heard was, 1, how painful birth was and how medicalised it was. And I was so scared of hospitals. This was where my mind went. I could feel my heart racing. And though there was something within me, it was like an intuitive voice, and she was screaming at me, saying to me, like, you can do this. You just need to learn how. That's where my journey started in my own pregnancy. And it was a journey. Like, I had to really go into the depths of who I was becoming from maiden to mother, and how I was going to go about it. And I really started to look into all of my options. I wanted to learn, and though the fear still consumed me. So I went on this journey myself, looking at options, and then someone mentioned hypnobirthing to me. I'm going to be honest with you, when I first heard the term hypnobirthing, I laughed. I was like, what is someone like swinging a pendulum or something in your birth? Little did I know it was nothing like that. And I went and I brought my husband along, and we learned all things birth. And I literally came out of that course going, why is this not shared? Why is this not mainstream? Why is it that my midwife or the doctors that I'm seeing are not actually sharing this with me? Now, bringing you more forward, I did the course, I practiced, I learned, I immersed myself in learning as much as I could about birth. And then the day came. I remember feeling the first waves of my body. And I was like, this is it. This is now like the day I've been training for, the day I get to meet my baby. Little did I know it was not going to be in that day. The labour itself was absolutely a journey for me. I was riding these waves, and it was, I think, around 28 hours that I was in labour at home. I was super chill. My surges, my contractions were quite spaced out. My husband was there with me, supporting me. But I remember it was around 8 p.m. This was the second night into the labour. It'd been around 25 hours by that time. And I felt my baby moving down. I felt my body like starting to really like intensify. The surges, every contraction was bringing me so much closer to my baby. And it was time. I was so excited to call my midwife. And so I got on the phone and I called her, and her phone got forwarded to the next midwife in her team because it was her day off. My heart sank. I'd had this beautiful relationship I had built through a continuity of care model with a midwife where I'd shared all my preferences, talked to her about wanting to be supported in a certain kind of birth. I felt so supported, and she wasn't going to be there. I had a little crisis of confidence moment, but I was like, okay, she's got another midwife. Well, that midwife answered and then said, sorry, Shari, I can't support you either. I've already been called out to another birth and worked my 12-hour quota. My heart sank again. Even my backup plan wasn't working. I had a plan and I wanted to stick to the plan, and it wasn't already working out. My husband had to bring me back in, and he's like, we're having this baby, babe. So we got in the car, we drove to the hospital. Now, the hospital that I birthed at didn't have any parking, and so Damien had to drop me off, and I waddled up to the hospital. He had called them to let them know that we were on our way, and he was parking the car. And we got up, and I pressed the button, the buzzer, and the doors opened, and this midwife rushed towards me. Like, the energy of like busyness was felt in the air. And I said, like, I'm Shari Lyon, and I'm in labour. I'm meant to be in the birth centre, but my midwife isn't available. Now, I'll never forget the tone in her voice. It was like very snappy. Oh, we're having a really busy night tonight. We don't even have any birth suites available for you. And I kind of looked at her like, okay, and like, well, like, I'm having this baby, so like, what do you mean? And I said, well, can I at least still birth in the birth centre room? Because the birth centre had 2 rooms down one end of the corridor and had the birth pools, and then all the rest of the birth suites were down the other end. And the way she replied was like, well, we're going to have to because we don't have any other space. So immediately I felt like I was a bit of an inconvenience to her, which wasn't a great start. My husband was still parking the car. I was like, okay, let's go into the birth suite. I was, meanwhile, still having like contractions, breathing through them. And I got in there, and the first thing she said, she's like, okay, I have to do some observations. I need to check you. I want you to lay down. My whole body just like froze. I had had in-depth conversations with my midwife about not feeling comfortable about having vaginal examinations unless it was absolutely necessary. And even though I had talked this out, I had my birth plan, this midwife did not have time to read it, and I didn't have a copy, and I wasn't in the frame of mind to say, can you read my birth plan? And she didn't ask me. She didn't say, Shari, would you be okay if I checked you? If she'd maybe framed it or communicated it in that way, I probably would have said I don't feel comfortable. But she didn't ask me. This was a command. I need to check you. I could feel that she was busy. I could feel she just wanted to get this done. And so that was the first time that I fawned. And you're going to hear me talk about fawning throughout the podcast. I appeased and pleased her because I didn't want to be seen as being difficult. She did the vaginal examination, and I hated every second of it. I could feel my whole body like I was climbing up the bed wanting her to just get out of me. Then for her to tell me after 28 hours, she goes, "You're about 4 centimetres." Again, my heart sank. I was like, how can I only be 4 centimetres? It's been 28 hours. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And I burst into tears. My husband came in, found me in tears and was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm only 4 centimetres. Like, I can't do this for another 30 hours. Because when you do the math, you hear of this dilation getting to 10 centimetres, and I wasn't even halfway. Even though I knew that I would be meeting him soon, my rational, analytical mind started to take over. And I was also then told that I wasn't allowed to birth in the water. So I felt like all of these things that I had prepared for were just now being taken away. I was still allowed to use the birth pool for water immersion though, so I took that. My husband kind of redirected me and said, let's get you in the birth pool. I got in there, laboured for a few more hours, got out, and I remember like it was the middle of July, the 11th of July 2011. And I got out of the pool and my whole body was just uncontrollably shaking and quivering. The room was so cold. And I felt like I was going to be sick. Like I could just feel it. And I'm like, kind of saying I need a sick bowl. Like I'm going to be sick, shaking. I had to lay down. Like my whole body was, I don't know, I can't even describe it. And it had only been 3 hours since that initial vaginal examination. And I was like, "Nope, I'm done. Get me out, tap out, get me the drugs." And the midwife's like, "I'll go and get you some morphine." And my husband was apparently like shooing her away, going, "No." I couldn't see the finish line. Like it had been a long labour and it was by this time maybe pushing like 2 a.m. And then the midwife came back over and said, "I need to check you again." By this time I was like, whatever. Like she inserted her fingers into my vagina and then said, "You're 9 centimetres." And I was like, what? I had gone from 28 hours it took me to get to only 4 centimetres, which wasn't only. My body was doing the job. To then within 3 hours, I was almost fully dilated. So I did take that vaginal examination a little bit more positively. Again, though, I wasn't asked. It was commanded. Because these vaginal examinations were routine within the system I was birthing in. And then I felt my whole body like starting to take over. Like I've never felt the power of my body starting to expel this baby. I made sounds I've never heard myself make before. These sounds were coming out of me and I felt my body pushing. I started to push side lying and it was like, "Nah, get me up," on my knees. And I started to bear down using the breath that I had practiced for months, that I had learnt within the hypnobirthing course that I did. Breathing my baby down, I could feel him. Like I could feel him coming down, retracting and coming down and retracting. And then I had my husband on one side and he was saying, "Babe, just breathe. Just breathe." And so I was. But then there was a stern, commanding voice behind me. "Hold your breath, Shari. Hold your breath. Push down into your bottom. Hold your breath and push." And in my head, I was like, I couldn't speak. This commanding voice was taking over and I'm like, "Shut up, just shut up." She kept saying, "No, Shari, hold your breath and push. You're doing it wrong. Hold your breath and push." And when you hear that from your midwife, like this stern command, you start kind of doubting yourself. Well, I did. And so I started to hold my breath and push. I fawned once again because I couldn't speak up. Then the moment came that I will never forget. I felt my body birthing my baby. This relief just like washed over me as he was born, and I turned around and he was given to me by my husband, placed on my chest, and I just remember his warm, like, body, the relief. Like, I will never forget that moment. Like, you never forget the moment you first meet your baby. And I remember looking at Damien, and he just had tears in his eyes, like, and he was like, "You did it." And I remember going, "Oh my God, I just did it." I was still kind of in a bit of shock. I had this beautiful little boy. He was perfect, 7 pounds 7, 3.3 kilos. His warmth, I just like remember smelling his head. I was like, "Oh my God, I just did it." Because I think that there was still a little bit of, I don't know, like, even though I'd done all of this prep and work, there was still a little bit of doubt, like, of the unknown. Can I actually do this? It was that moment, like the euphoria, like the oxytocin, like it was so beautiful. Now, for the first time in my birth, I actually found my voice. And I remember having Harley, and I remember looking up to the midwife, and I said, "I want to birth my placenta naturally." Because I had learnt this. I had had a physiological birth. I didn't end up having the pain relief, even though I was very close. And I will never forget the tone in this woman's voice as she snapped at me. "I don't have time to wait for your placenta." And I felt my whole body just freeze and retract. It was like I was being told off as like a little girl, like, how dare I ask her to wait? And I think I actually apologized. I actually said sorry, but in my head I was just like, just get out. In that moment, it was safer for me to stay silent than speak up. Because I didn't feel safe with this woman, with this midwife who was meant to be the one to care for me. I just wanted her out. And I remember her injecting a needle of Syntocin into my thigh that I didn't consent to. And then there was a bit of time, like time felt like nothing, but then I remember her using cord traction to pull my placenta out. But I had him in my arms. And I was like, "Oh, he's here. It's okay." And even though, like, on paper, like, my birth is perfect, and I kept telling myself that for years, I still walked out of that birth feeling like I had failed, even though I had done it. Like, I felt less than. And then I blamed myself for months. Why didn't I speak up? I should have said no. Not realising that in that moment I had gone into an instinctual response of safety. I couldn't fight. I couldn't run from it. I froze. And I appeased and pleased and fawned to that medical caregiver because she was busy. I didn't want to be seen to be difficult. And if I said no, would she have supported me? I became one of the 1 in 3 women in Australia that had experienced, and I didn't realise this, like, being treated poorly in birth due to lack of communication or coercive communication and language in the birth space. And though I could have gone into full effect and fed into that moment and stayed in that trauma of blaming myself, but instead it lit a fire in me that I could not, like, I couldn't silence. It was a fire of, like, I want every woman to know their rights. I want every woman to be educated. I want every woman in Australia in the world to know that they have rights in birth and that we shouldn't be treated like that. And so I went on this quest of going, okay, well, I want to educate women, because I did gain a lot from the educational hypnobirthing course that I had done. My ego kept coming in though and telling me, like, who's going to listen to you? You're not a midwife. You're not medically trained. But the push, and if anyone has ever felt this before, like, you cannot ignore it. When you feel like there is, like, this was not just me going, oh, I want to teach childbirth education classes. It was like, this is it. This is what I'm here on this earth to do. And I trained, first of all, in an international program of hypnobirthing, and I remember going into the training like shitting myself. I was the only mother in there. All the rest were midwives or like birth workers already. And again, I questioned myself and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, can I do this? But where I lived at the time, which was a small town in central Queensland, because we'd moved from the Gold Coast, there was no one up there. So I was like, I've got to do this. I have to do this for my community. And then I trained with another program here in Australia, and I taught that program for 10 years, won probably over 8 awards over the 10 years when I was there. And I started teaching hypnobirthing and childbirth education classes in central Queensland, and I knew I had found my purpose, the passion. Like, and when you work from a place of passion, it does not feel like work. And then every year I would invest more into education, into workshops, into trainings, into more certifications. And I was teaching for 10 years in this program, and I had taught thousands of couples all around the world, online, face-to-face, on the Gold Coast. And though as I continued to grow, this program I was teaching was not growing with me. And every hypnobirthing program is different. And I found that there just wasn't enough information in regards to navigating roadblocks and if the labour shifts and changes or detours, like how to manage that or how to navigate that. And I'd learnt so many different modalities like birth mapping and spinning babies and optimal maternal positioning. And I then went on to do my coaching certification. And now I'm a master practitioner of NLP, linguistics and communication. And this is what I realised was the missing piece within childbirth education. I didn't want to just teach women about how to have a natural birth. I wanted them to feel totally empowered to know how to be a driver in their experience and be really open to all different birth options and journeys. And so I left that program that I was teaching for 10 years and I developed my own program. And I've called it the Journey to Birth program because it is a journey. Birth is a big journey, and I have developed this program because even though I've been in this space for now almost 14 years, there are a lot of parents that are educating themselves. When I heard about this inquiry into birth last year, to hear that 1 in 3 women have walked out of their experiencing some kind of trauma in birth, whether that be physical, emotional, I'm like, what's going on? Like, what is happening in our country? Here in Australia, we now see birth as a medical event that sometimes happens naturally. I find that when women come to me, all they're hearing are stories of elective caesareans and inductions of labour and epidurals, which, please know, there's absolutely time and place for those. But here in Australia right now, we have a 42% caesarean rate. 42%. The hospital here, locally where I live, got up to a 51% cesarean rate last year at one point. It's come back down, which is good, but that's over 1 in 2 women are ending up in a cesarean. What's happening within our medical model? What's happening within the birth space? Why are so many women coming out of this experience feeling trauma? And that's the start of their journey of being a woman, being a mother. We have lost the facts that an awareness and innate knowing that our bodies, birth is a natural physiological function of the body that sometimes needs medical intervention. And when I looked into this inquiry, seeing that one of the contributing factors of birth trauma is the lack of communication or ineffective communication, or where fear-based coercive language has been used in the birth space. Now, through my coaching certification, I have now supported a lot of women through birth trauma. And the common thread that I'm hearing through the trauma is where women have felt like they've not been heard, they've not been given options, and they've been spoken to really poorly. There's been a gap of communication, or where they felt like they didn't feel safe to speak up. And so instead of fighting or running, which is an instinctual response that we go into, they go into the fawning response. And in the context of birth, the fawning response may look like conforming to interventions or certain expectations, but not asking questions to clarify why. Just like with what happened to me, where I did actually speak up and was totally shut down. The reason why I'm telling you this, and I wanted to take you through my story, is because communication is more than just words. It is more than just language. And the words we use have impact, but it's more than that. It's body language. It's the tone in someone's voice. It is the energy that they bring into the room. You know, when I asked to be supported, to have time, that's all I was asking for, to birth my placenta naturally and let my body finish the job. If the midwife, and the way that this midwife in particular said it to me, her tonality was stern and the tone was low. I don't have time to wait for your placenta. If she had said, Shari, it's safer if I give you the injection. Or she might have said, Shari, your body did an amazing job. This injection is just going to help you finish it. How different those 3 ways of communicating felt. I wish she kind of just lied to me, to be honest. I was totally dismissed. I was not heard. I was not respected. I didn't feel respected or heard. And I don't want any of you listening to this to come out of your birth feeling the same. This is why I have started this podcast. I have been teaching for over 14 years. I've taught over 7,000 people around the world. And though there needs to be a bigger impact in communication, in knowledge, in understanding your options, and that what this new podcast is going to deliver to you. I'm so excited to share more information with you to help you on your journey through conception, through pregnancy, through birth and postpartum. And throughout this podcast, I'm going to be bringing on quite a lot of special guests. I'm going to be bringing in mums to share their birth stories, birth partners and dads to share their birth stories together and separately. I'll be bringing in medical professionals and other allied healthcare professionals to give you information to support you to ask better quality questions and to create more connection with your medical care team. Please know that I have done a lot of work on myself in working through my own birth experience, even right back to my birth. And I know, and I just want to advocate also for medical caregivers here, I know that that midwife was doing the best that she could with the resources she had in that moment. The system probably put a lot of pressure on her. They were having a busy night. And I get that she didn't have time. I make sense of that. And so I don't blame her, but I don't blame myself anymore either. And so I also want to bring awareness into our medical care team and where the system is at and open up conversations about how can we make change together, because we are the change that our maternity system needs to see. I have taught hundreds of medical professionals over the years. I've taught obstetricians, I've taught anaesthetists, I've taught heaps of midwives, nurses, paramedics, and all of them have said that they love when my clients, my couples come in, because they are able to ask good quality questions so they can have better conversations. It creates connection. They know options, know their rights, and they take responsibility for the decisions they make. And that is what I want for you. And that is why I've started this podcast, and I'm excited to share more with you. So thank you so much for joining me for this first episode. Please know I'm here to support you on your journey, and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast and share this podcast with anyone you know who's planning a pregnancy or is pregnant or even who've had their baby. Because it's through us supporting each other, spreading, the ripple effect will happen, and we can all make change in this space. Now, a little disclaimer, please know that I'm not medically trained. So nothing that I share within this podcast, within any episode, should ever be seen as medical advice or in the replacement of the advice of your medical caregivers. This is for informational purposes only, and I would always suggest, as I share information through each episode, if something sparks your attention, write it down so that you can go and have a better conversation with your medical caregivers. I'm excited to share this journey to birth with you, and thank you for joining me in this episode.